whatever.
I'm good with this. I like this.
You have it talking over it, though, so it doesn't really show off as well, like, in camera. I'm just over to the side while you're laughing at me. And, I mean, that really sold the, like, performing monkey aspect of that whole thing. Where Rick's out here, like, cracking the whip, like, yeah, dance, monkey, dance! And then you guys are laughing, like, not even giving me the...
I'm going to order you one of those H&M sweatshirts. You can be the coolest monkey in the jungle.
I like that. That sounds good.
Oh, we're starting this off great.
Yeah. Fucking fuego right off the bat. Jesus Christ.
On that note, welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my co-hosts, Dio and Victor Rodriguez from Bloody Elbow. All three of us, we are here to talk about Invicta FC 27 this week. Kaufman versus Kianzad. And a card that we were discussing ahead of time is, I'm not going to say lackluster by Invicta standards, but really, even by Invicta standards, full of unknown talent. Full of people that we just have not seen fight at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, yeah, we do have a ton of people that are making their Invicta debuts, and a lot of it seems like this is more planting seeds type of event, which makes it kind of important. You know, you want to keep a good eye on these talents. Some of them are still a bit raw, but some of them have some really good amateur experience. So it's going to be an interesting experiment compared to some of the other events. But it definitely looks like it's going to be a fun card either way.
Yeah, like they're definitely full swing, as I was saying off before. Like they're full swing into feeder league mode now. And the other thing that I started to notice too was we saw in a lot of the women, you'll just see like in other cards, you'd see there'll be like their 2-1 AMI records, or maybe 2 or 3 AMI records. But a lot of them have like 10, 8, 9, 10 amateur bouts before they go pro, which is good. Because everybody doesn't need to be going pro. So that's a good thing to see that they are actually getting a lot of cage time beforehand, instead of just jumping right into it. If you're 1-1 on your AMI record and you get thrown in against somebody that is 10-2 on their amateur record and you're both debuting at the same time, shit's gonna go bad for you.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's a lot of inexperienced fighters on this card, but you look at them and there you see a lot of people who have been fighting for a while, just not at a professional level, which means that, as we've seen with a lot of Invicta cards, they're good at digging up women who can be interesting fan favorites almost from day one, where you'll see them fight once or twice and you're like, oh, I'm excited to see Mizuki Inoue or something for the rest of her career after like 2 fights.
Right. Yeah. Who I think is going to go to the UFC after she comes back from injury.
Very, very likely. Yeah. Anyway, before we get into this card, I know you talked about we did kind of an overview of like women's MMA in the last year, and we're talking about maybe doing something similar this year. Should we jump into that before we do the card, or do you guys want to pick that up at the end?
I can do whatever. All
right. I may say we should jump in at the front of this, just because I want to get into it a little before we jump in and start talking about the fights on this card.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think it's kind of, obviously the whole MMA culture right now has slowly become more and more of a corporate culture, less hardcore, less, the cards aren't stacked top bottom in the way they used to be. They aren't full of all the big fights. It's usually, we're getting more like a couple big fights and then a bunch of stuff that's just not as fun as it used to be.
Right.
But I kind of feel like, especially like maybe more than anything, that favors women's MMA because UFC has picked up more of it than ever.
Yeah.
And you're still getting get some of that flash for women outside the organization. You still get organizations like Invicta, or you get women on Rising cards and places like that where they can get popped for being like one of the few women on an event, and a sort of rare talent. And then you have the UFC, which is now finally getting enough people to put together enough fights to actually feel like people are getting paid, not just Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Ronda Rousey, her disappearing from MMA left a void.
Yeah.
And it took time for that, void to be filled up with something. And now that we actually have a new, we've got a new weight class, which for some women that were in, because we had 135 and 115. So 20-pound difference. And you had a lot of, you have folks that either fought outside of 125 or were just taking fights in certain weight classes because that's all that whatever promotions were doing in that region. And now you actually have, there you say like a Jessica I, for instance, who's fighting soon. Like she was a 125er, came in at 135, and it's like, she just, she didn't have the size, had the skills for the most part. But now you have something where they can actually, people can fluctuate. If this weight class doesn't work for them, they have 3 weight or 4 weight classes now to go to. So the void wasn't, there was a void because there was no star, but now you have like a whole class of people that are filling in something that we didn't have before. I know they're trying to push like the Paige Van Zants of the world, but organically some other people are becoming more and more fan favorites. Like the world is now all in love with Roxanne Modafferi after, her on Tough. And
more than that, you have a class of elite fighters that are like an actual class of elite fighters, where before it was really just, it was like Ronda Rousey, and then some talented fighters below her, none of whom could really like separate themselves from one another. And now you have like, you have your Holly Holm and Jermaine Durandamy and Chris Cyborg and Valentina Shevchenko and Amanda Nunes. And, there are like a significant portion of talent that is separate from the people coming up and entering at the bottom and saying, jumping into the UFC and trying to make a mark. They're actual, there's an elite class. And I think that's something that is really beneficial to finally, it's something that could only be established with the UFC broadening the scope of its divisions.
Recognizable names is the other thing, because this is a star-driven sport, and for the longest time, it was you had Ronda, and then you had everybody else that Ronda was beating up, essentially. And it was kind of like it was just like a gelatinous glob of people, where it's like you could just take one person out and you could just interchange them, didn't matter what fight it was. But now, they're giving them time on, the pre-fight specials, and they're actually putting people out there to talk to the fans and stuff. So they're slowly getting it. Like they are starting to get, I will give that to WME, IMG. There's a ton of shit that they get wrong, but they do understand how to build stars. So it's good to see that happening.
I don't know that they're doing a good enough job necessarily of creating stars as is. I mean, I feel like obviously this is before the WMA regime. They put all their eggs in the Rousey basket, which I don't really fault them tremendously for, but they never had a backup plan, which, obviously when Holly head kicked her and the entire thing came crashing down, they never had any insurance. They never had anything in their back pocket. And it was exacerbated by having her come back a year later. And it's fine. Look, she didn't do any press or whatnot. And, we all remember what that was. And that's fine too. Well, I'm totally fine with that being the case. But she gets essentially sacrificed to Amanda Nunes, and there's no hype for Amanda either. And we get Dana on record saying, well, it doesn't matter who she fought. She could have been fighting anybody. Then A, why didn't you give Amanda more of a shine to build things up even more? Or B, why did Ronda have to fight for the title and get demolished in the first place? You could have had a very good fight between her, a great rematch between her and Beige Correia, a fight that Ronda could win again. Maybe it would be a little more competitive a second time around. Probably not, but still, right? You can still generate that money, keep that going, and keep things a little more vibrant. But some air did eventually get out of that, and you do have a recognition on the UFC's part that maybe we should introduce flyweight. Maybe we should formalize this absorption of bringing in Cyborg and giving her own division, as we should have done a while ago. Like, that's fine, and I get that too. But I don't know. I mean, I guess there's more of a disappointment on my part that WME, for all the for the reputation that they have for creating stars and for all the big plans and ideas that people had were going to move forward. And this rings true for both men's and women's divisions. I don't really think that they've done as much as they probably should have at this point. So, I mean, I'll wait and see, but time is running out for some of these people, and it's a shame that they haven't.
Well, they're always going to be running up against the UFC corporate culture that surrounds Dana White, and the vision that the UFC brand is always going to be bigger than any fighters. And we don't want to make anybody too special. We don't want to make anybody too big, because.
But they leave money on the table in the process, though. I mean, yeah.
That's it, yeah, they do. It sucks, and it isn't. It doesn't feel like as good as they could do, but it's part of their whole vision and always has been.
Right.
The other thing that you have to remember with WME IMG, and this is the only thing I'll defend them against, they had never run into an animal like MMA before.
Yeah.
Everything that they've dealt with before is Hollywood, industry type stuff. This is a completely, MMA compared to boxing, compared to kickboxing, compared to any of the stick and ball sports. The culture that we have in MMA, as far as fandom goes, is so much different from what they had. So when you inherit a shit sandwich, essentially, like you had with, the Ronda Rousey situation, as you've got this unstoppable force, so you thought, and then she loses, comes back, and they were like, okay, well, she's Ronda Rousey. She's gonna bounce back and put all the eggs right back into the basket.
Yeah.
When we say no promo, if you guys don't remember, like, there was no promo for her whatsoever. And even after the event happened, the spotlight was still on Ronda Rousey. So it's like they had to learn pretty quickly, from the ground level up, from probably one of the worst situations possible, because you had one star that's gone, you have another star that wants to go to another sport, and you had all of this stuff. There was like, oh shit, we not only had WME IMG not done that before, the UFC had never done that before, had that happen before. So they kind of they got the shit end of the stick when it came to what they bought, what they were sold, what they actually got. But as time goes on, they're doing better than I expected them to do on certain things. But they still got a long fucking way to go.
So the other thing I want to talk about just a little bit before we jump into talking about this Invicta card is going back to the point with Ryzen. Do you think that they are going to have any ability to make a separate impact for women's MMA?
No.
Alongside the UFC? No, you don't think they're ever going to be dedicated enough to pull money the way, like...
I do.
I don't. So after hearing what the viewership was on the last Rising card, how it was so much lower than it was the previous year, that kind of threw me for a loop. Where I'm like, I don't know whether they're going to be able to do this on a consistent basis. Did they have awesome fights this time? Yes. Yeah. But especially when you have the Gabby Garcia situation, where your tent pole, one of your tent poles of the event is a freak show fight. No two ways about it. It's a freak show fight. And you only have very specific weight classes. And, the other thing too is with Risen, they book around fighters as opposed to picking the best matches possible. So, Gabby Garcia is a tent pole, Reina is a tent pole, the other Reina is a
How dare you? The disrespect, Reina Miura.
King Reina is another tent pole, and you are going to see them book around those people as opposed to trying to build a division. Because that's why I don't see them making an impact, because they are going to hitch their wagons to certain fighters, and that's all that they're going to promote. We're going to see the same thing with Juju Alclair. Like, it's going to be like they're only going to keep a microscope on just certain people. So that's why I don't think it's going to make a big impact. Will they produce some contenders? Hell yes. Will they be able to make a larger impact? I don't think so.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to me because the biggest thing to me seems to be that they've been able to position themselves as a money pull for talent that's willing to travel and is looking for something else to, someplace else to go.
Right.
They have something more to offer than, anywhere else other than maybe Bellator, which I still don't know exactly what Bellator is doing with women's MMA.
I don't think Bellator knows what Bellator is doing with women's MMA.
I think they had an idea, and then they promptly decided they were juggling too many things at once.
Yeah. So all those people that just signed on to fight, at 145 and stuff like that, it's like, oh, well, sucks for y'all.
Anyway, so that is like the interesting counterpoint, or the interesting aside, is what can Ryzen do? Because Bellator, unfortunately Bellator in general, I think that their bigger problem is just that they kind of felt like they had all these plans that were going to take off, but then you have a year that was by and large pretty poor for the UFC outside of Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, and despite whatever Dana may say otherwise,
the best year ever.
Yeah, I don't doubt that they made more money last year than ever before. I don't doubt that. That one fight was huge for them.
Yeah,
but pay-per-view,
and it wasn't even one of their fights. That's the crazy part. They probably made more money off that one fight than they did on all of their other events combined.
Yeah,
gates and all.
The aside of that is that in a year where the UFC ratings across all their TV platforms weren't that great, Bellator did not make any ground at all.
No,
their ratings were also
they failed to capitalize in pretty much every respect with that. In fact, I'd say that even Ryzen gained far more ground than comparatively. If you look at it in relative to what Bellator was hoping, Ryzen get a lot more ground. A lot of fans in the US now not only know what Ryzen is, but they paid money to go watch that pay-per-view or the pay-per-view events as they unfolded. And maybe the New Year's Eve event didn't have as strong a showing with the Japanese ratings, and maybe there is some kind of a death sentence with how much time they're going to have before money runs out because it's unfeasible to hold up. But I don't know. Maybe they don't have to do things the way the UFC does them to keep women's MMA viable in its own way, or at least give it a degree of give it its own platform. And at least if they're going to do the Ronda Rousey thing, like what just mentioned, as far as we're going to book around this one person and make them that one star. At least they're doing it with various people. As opposed to just one division, and then we're just going to keep it that way. And then maybe we'll add strawweight and flyweight. No, we're going to do this across all these, and we're going to bring in people like Cindy Dandois, who actually beat the person that clearly was, the underdogs that they're bringing in aren't completely hopeless unless they're fighting Gabby Garcia, but that's another kettle of fish. But I don't know, man. I kind of feel that in its own way, it's actually going to be something that nets a few positives for women's MMA overall.
Chelsea.
All right. On that note, we should jump into Invicta FC 27, which also just had their weigh-ins. So I can update on that real quick. Looks like Tiffany Masters missed weight.
It's not Invicta card if nobody misses weight.
But that and Penny Kianzad may have also come in over the limit at 136.7, assuming that was supposed to be at 135, then
it's bantamweight.
Yeah. So Penny Kianzad missed, and Tiffany Masters missed, but that looks like about it. That looks like it. So that's actually pretty low for an Invicta card, but that does mean that your main event includes a fighter missing weight.
Yeah.
And on that note, we should jump in at the bottom. And our first fight up, a strawweight bout, Jade Ripley, Helen Peralta. And Vic, what can you tell me about this fight?
Okay, well, Jade Ripley, well, both fighters are making their professional debuts, but they do have some experience under their belt. Ripley is 6-0 as an amateur, 2 TKOs and a submission. Pretty decent boxing. She does have a tendency to get backed up a lot. Her head movement is not great. She does take also a lot of damage, but she's got incredible cardio and she's got a pretty decent left hand that hits pretty hard. So that's something to look out for here. Thing is, she's fighting Helen Peralta, who 9-1 as an amateur with 2 TKOs, 1 straight knockout. Excellent finishing instinct for when it actually comes in handy. A bit of a rudimentary grappling game, but also has excellent cardio. And, she does move a little better. She does have a bit more, her defense is a bit better here as well. I'm going to probably say that Peralta hits harder, but I don't know, man. This is actually, I'm not sure how to call this one. I'm probably going to go with Ripley by decision on this one, just by being able to kind of, actually, no, you know what? I'm sorry. No, Peralta by decision, being able to back up her opponent, kind of keep the judges on that control.
Dia, what do you think?
I got to go with Peralta on this one too. Of course, the things that the encyclopedia Vic Rodriguez said.
Oh,
but one of the other things to note here is, so Jade Ripley has been fighting at an amateur level since 2014, and then she had a layoff in 2016. She had a kid, and one of the things that she actually mentioned in the Invicta FC All Angles was she was not sure how her body was going to bounce back after having a child. So for me, I'm going to go with Peralta because she's been consistent. She's been fighting since 2016 multiple times a year. So I'm going to go with her for momentum, and I think she's going to be able to keep the pressure on Ripley.
All right, interesting to note. Let's see. Peralta, as an amateur, has only competed at 125 and 135. Ripley has competed at 115 and 125. So this is Peralta's first time in the weight class.
All right.
No odds on that fight. Let's bring it up to an atomweight bout. Luma Lukbunmi versus Melissa Wang. And Dia, what do you got?
I mean, it's kind of tough to even say anything about Lukbunmi because she's got no AMI, no pro, no nothing. All we know is that she's competed in Muay Thai and supposedly has 300 plus fights. So
it's a very Muay Thai thing to have.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So it's kind of tough to say who to go with on this one. Not to say, and that's not to say that Melissa Wang isn't an accomplished fighter in her own rights. But yeah, it's kind of tough to really pick on this one. But I'm gonna roll the dice and go with Lukbunmi on this one, just because I like chaos. So,
all right, Vic, you going with the Muay Thai, the experienced Muay Thai fighter over the AKA?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Melissa Wong does train at AKA. She's got a 2-3 amateur career, but I don't know how. Even though she's 1-0 as a professional, I don't know how you can pick against somebody who is, who has been doing Muay Thai since she was 9.
Right.
You know what I mean? Grew up in a combat sports family under her father's tutelage and all that. So I don't really know that, yeah, sure. I don't know that Wong's training at AKA necessarily means that it translates to her having better wrestling than what Lukbunmi's training partners might have. I don't know that I want to put a full amount of stock on that. So probably smart money is going to be on Luma.
Serena Bars would have something to say about that,
Wow. But that's different times, different atmosphere.
All right.
Apparently, Lukbunmi is she's training with someone else that's on the
I should hope so. She's doing like cardio kickboxing.
Yeah.
Was she training with Mallory Martin? I think.
I believe so. Yeah.
Because Martin spends a lot of time down at Tiger Muay Thai.
Yeah. So she does have some.
Yeah. No.
But it's one of those ones. This is one of those where they just kind of throw you a wrench real quick, like, hey, figure it out.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to another strawweight bout: Mallory Martin, Tiffany Masters. Vic, what do you got?
I'm going to start off with Masters, who has been wrestling since she was about 8 or 9 years old. 4-1 with a draw in her amateur career, 3 TKOs and a submission. Currently 2-1 as a professional. Very solid athlete, and she pushes a really heavy pace. Her striking is functional. It's really good for backing her opponent up against the cage and allowing her to start setting up her takedowns. And she is working on her striking. As far as her transitions on the ground, passing guard, that sort of thing, that's also sort of a work in progress. I mean, her wrestling is really good, but it's more of a dynamic. Like, I'm going to take you down. I'm going to spring up to get the side control instead of working the legs or applying the weight and moving that. Maybe we'll see some new wrinkles in this fight from what the time that she's had between her last fight and this one. Mallory Martin's going to be a tough out, though. 3 submissions as an amateur, 6-1 on that record. Currently 1-2 as a pro, but she also had a bunch of kickboxing fights. Really, really good submission defense. Good striking. She's patient. She's able to get herself out of a lot of rough spots, like, for example, bottom of half guard and stuff like that. Very rarely do you see her mounted. So her cardio is pretty good, although her volume is a little inconsistent, and I think that might end up being a bit of a problem if Masters starts throwing more shots than she does. So it might cost her on the scorecards. But something's kind of telling me here, I want to go with Martin on this one. I think that she'll be able to stave off a lot of the threats that Masters poses and be able to edge her out with the striking as the fight goes on.
All right, Dia, who are you picking?
I'm going to go with the wrestler. Like, it's at this level, especially in women's MMA, I am going to go with the wrestler. Like, striking, unless you've got that one shot, lights out, or just hits so hard that it completely throws their equilibrium off, striking only goes so far. But, like, if you were, if you had that Hisei Watanabe, hit you and you go to the land of wind and ghost kind of power, sure, I could go with that. But so I'm going to go with the wrestler on this one. So,
all right. Yeah, it's a reasonably safe bet for a lot of lower level cards. When in doubt, go with the person who's got the takedowns. That brings us to a rare featherweight fight and the incredibly jacked looking Akila Al-Hamid.
Jacked as fuck.
Yeah. That picture on Tapology, man, like, I can't flex like that.
Shit. Even at my most diesel, I've never been able to flex like that. So, yeah.
And she's taking on Felicia Spencer. Dio, who you got?
I'm gonna go with Spencer on this one. It's like, as jacked as Akila Al-Hamid is, like, Spencer is a decorated grappler. So I gotta go with that. Like, when anytime somebody's making their pro debut, I can't, especially because Felicia Spencer has been on, I think she's had all of her pro fights in Invicta. Yeah.
She's had at least 2.
Yeah, she's had 3. Her first 3 were in Invicta. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with Spencer on this one.
All right, Vic.
Yeah, I do find it a bit weird that someone's making their pro debut against someone like Spencer, who's shown a lot of promise even at an early stage.
Have you seen those biceps, man? Well, she's doing that late '90s MMA training. It's all bench press.
Yeah, the whole Ken Shamrock routine. Yeah, that's what it is. Just keep running on the beach.
No, if you see her, how they had her at media day, like, no, that is an athletic looking woman everywhere. Yeah. So
I didn't see that. No,
she's got the Rashad Evans body. So exactly.
Let's start off with Akila Hamid, who's the lesser known of the 2 fighters here. As we mentioned, obviously pro debut, 4-0 as an amateur with a submission. Her boxing is very basic, and it adds up. But over time, her head movement starts to fade away, and she's kind of a bit more of a target. Her counters aren't necessarily as crisp after a certain period of time. They work early, but not enough to do a massive amount of damage. And that's probably going to be a thing that ends up costing her here. Pretty okay with the leg kicks and, creating a bit of space when she wants to keep things at a striking range that's comfortable for her. And her takedowns are pretty basic. Problem is that Spencer, her grappling is not basic. It's actually a lot more advanced. 5-1 as an amateur, 3-0 as a pro, 2 submissions and a TKO. We've seen her be pretty entertaining as a fighter. I mean, she's able to go from one stage to the next, and she works those paces on her opponent. And she's able to break down her submission attempts into stages. She gets to the mount, and then she immediately starts targeting the arm. She waits. Like it's not simple like the Rose Namajunas flying armbar, fluid, immediate thing, right? She drowns you with that pressure as she's moving. And she's got better use of range as well. So, I mean, that plus a stealthy submission game and better grappling overall, like submission, takedown defense and better takedowns of her own. Yeah, I got to go with Spencer on this.
All right. That brings us to our first fight that we actually have odds for, a flyweight bout. Sherry Moraski versus Brogan Sanchez. And Vic, who you taking?
All right. Sanchez is 4-0 as a professional. No amateur fights at all. Drowns her opponent in volume. Just a lot of punches and, not too many kicks. Her cardio isn't that great, though. And after a certain period of time, she starts to peter out, and that starts creating all manner of problems. She is also pretty good at getting out of certain tough spots, from bottom position on the ground and stuff like that. Or, if she's got her back up against the cage, she's able to sort of move her way out some ways. But I don't really feel that her initial assault, much like in the case of Akila Hamid, I don't think that what she'll be able to do early is going to give the big payoff at the end against somebody like Moraski. Moraski's 5-1 as an amateur, 4-0 as a pro. Got herself pretty well put together with her striking, and she's really, really quick to initiate the clinch. Now, once she clinches in the middle of the cage, she's going to push to get you against the cage, and that's where the fight really begins for her. So even though Sanchez has a pretty solid jiu-jitsu pedigree, I believe she's a brown belt or black belt, Moraski's adapted it pretty well for MMA. I kind of think that maybe she's going to have the tools to put this one away, or at least keep enough control to get a decision.
All right, Dio, who are you taking?
Going with Moraski on this one. Not only, main thing here for me is experience. As Vic said, she's got a long record fighting as both pro and amateur. The other thing, too, with Brogan Sanchez is the level of competition that she has faced thus far. Everything has been in PXC in Guam, and a lot of times when you have those regional-based I know I've said it ad nauseum on here before, but when you have a lot of those regional-based promotions, the level of competition isn't always that great. And being that she has no amateur stuff, just 4 pro fights, and Cherry Moraski has fought, a steady, step up. She's fought the Shannon Sins that we've seen. She won her last fight in Invicta by choke. So she seems to be a little bit more well-rounded from what I could tell. And if she gets Brogan up against the fence, since her cardio is already suspect, that's just going to drain her. That will just drain all of your energy, especially if you are just a puncher. We're going to see a lot of Brogan. I expect that we'll see a lot of Brogan up against the fence, just kind of punching the back of Moraski's head, attempting to get the ref to separate them. But that's going to sap her energy, eventually get taken down and submitted.
All right. Well, Brogan Walker is actually the pretty sizable favorite for both of you guys picking against her. She opened at -245, adjusted to -243, which is where she is right now. And Moraski opened at +175, adjusted to +178, which is where she is right now.
I believe Moraski is a replacement. Maybe that might have something to do with it.
No, it's not what I'm seeing, but maybe. Tapology doesn't have any fights canceled or any fight changes listed.
Yeah. Oh well.
Could be, but it's I don't know. At least that's not the information I have right in front of me, so I cannot tell you. That brings us to a atomweight bout: Ashley Cummins, Stephanie Alba, and Dio. Who are you taking?
Who am I taking? I'm going to take Alba just because I don't like Ashley Cummins. So I am biased as hell on this one. I really don't care what the technical breakdown is. I will root against her forever. But
just a hater. Just Just
I have my reasons. But yeah, like they've both been spotty as hell as far as their records go. Ashley Cummins is special. Like she had a long run where she was just getting trounced, match after match after match after match after match. Eventually finally rebounded back, and she's bounced between different organizations. She went from Invicta, was on a UFC card, ended up going to Bellator, then back to Invicta. So on this one, I expect her to have another brain fart like she tends to do in a lot of fights, where things will be going well and then she'll just kind of get overzealous with something, and next thing you know, she's getting caught with something. So I'm gonna go with Alba. But again, I'm biased.
Vic, do you share? Are you drinking from the same chalice of haterade as Dio?
No, because I pissed in it. Oh no!
You pissed in your own chalice? That's disgusting.
Yeah, listen, man. If as long as I scrub it nice and clean, for me, that's good.
That is a disgusting.
In defense of Ashley Cummins, she did spend some time trying to find success at strawweight, and didn't actually really get back on the horse until she dropped down to atomweight, which suits her a hell of a lot better. And also that last fight that she had, the loss to Jinian Frey, she had her in a lot of trouble. I mean, that was, that was pretty close in some respects. So I really got to tip my hat to her for doing as well as she did. All right, so let's start off with Cummins. 5-4 as a professional. It doesn't look great, but when you take these things into consideration and you look at how she's progressed in those wins and how nasty her submission game has gotten, I really got to give her a lot of credit with that. She's super scrappy. She's a lot more of an opportunist than she seems at first. Whether it's grabbing an ankle or grabbing a knee or, whatever it is, she is going to go for a submission very quickly. Her striking is pretty quick. Her cardio is decent. Striking doesn't look that great, but it looks good enough. It's respectable, at least for where she's at, and she's slowly putting her game together overall. Whereas Alba is also really good, though. I mean, 6-4 as an amateur with 1 submission and 1 TKO. We saw Alba actually going. She was 3-1 as a professional, and started off her professional career spotless with fights in the regional scene and Legacy. I mean, she trains with Tanya Evinger, and she's got a very straightforward grappling approach. Just hug and immediately start taking someone down. It's not very pretty. Questionable with her choices when it comes to striking, especially from the second round onward. She's got pretty good wrestling pressure, but she does also take a lot of damage. Now that combined with the fact that Cummins has a really good submission game, I can pick her on this one. I think Cummins' experience and her ability to that now that she's really getting everything where it needs to be, I think that's going to give her the edge, and she's going to end up getting a submission.
All right. Odds on this. Cummins is a pretty heavy favorite. Opened at -215, adjusted down to -240, currently at -243. Alba opening at +165, adjusting up to +180, currently at +178. And that brings us to a strawweight bout. There we go. Between Sharon Jacobson and Ashley Nichols and Vic. Who you got?
All right, now you guys were clowning on me earlier with the whole the wrestler is the person who you should pick thing. All right, here I'm going to have to side with the wrestler, but because it's a very different wrestler. Jacobson, 2-0 as a professional, 3-2 as an amateur.
Isn't that like Turkish oil wrestling where they wear the leather pants and they just douse themselves in oil and reach down each other's pants to try to take?
Yeah, grabbing the crotch is legal in that stuff, isn't it? I don't know. I haven't really seen much of it.
I don't know.
I hope not.
So the head and arm, you got the cock and balls takedown.
Hey,
there
you go.
I can
tip your waitresses. We'll be here all night. There you go.
I can see a few things more effective to get me on the mat than that.
Out in the oil check, yes. Actually, no.
In pro wrestling, there is a move. It's called the penis plex, where you grab the guy.
Oh, right.
Okay, we're off this.
Yeah, Joey. Just Google Joey Ryan. Believe me, it is so worth it.
It is. It really is.
Do not cut the penis. Actually, Jacobson's 4-2. I was wrong on that. Excellent wrestling, former national champion, smothering a rugged pace. Her wrestling is actually a little more polished. It looks a lot more refined. Her fight style is not as ugly as someone like, for example, Alba. Nichols is, and she's been kickboxing for a very long time. She's been doing Muay Thai 3-1 as in her professional record with 2 TKOs. Fitting because she's mostly fought in TKO, Canadian organization that's given us a lot of talent from up there. Currently on a 3-fight win streak, and she's got really crisp technique. I mean, when you watch her strike and she's on, it looks like textbook. But I don't really have that kind of faith against somebody like Jacobson who can take a few hits and keep going and, eventually have her way with you on the mat. So I'm going to have to go with Sharon on this one.
All right. Dio?
Got to go with Sharon on this one, too. She was beating the brakes off of Callie Robbins before Callie Robbins grabbed the submission in the last fight. Like, she will walk through basically whatever Ashley Nichols has. Ashley Nichols does not seem to have that lights out kind of power. So as crisp as it's going to be, I think Sharon Jacobson is going to ragdoll her around the ring a little bit. And just pound her out until getting a decision. She's like a 5'1", just little tank, just moves forward and just, it's a lot.
Odds makers agree with you guys on this one. Jacobson opens as the favorite at -150 and has dropped steadily to -204. Ashley Nichols opened at +110 and has climbed steadily to +159. That brings us to our co-main event now. Flyweight bout. Former champion, right? Yes.
Yeah, no, title challenger.
Former title challenger. There we go.
Yep.
Former two-time title challenger Vanessa Porto taking on Mariana Moraes. And Dio, any way you're picking Moraes here?
Hell no. The fuck? That's stupid. Like if you pick Moraes and you try to give a good reason, you look stupid. So last time we saw Moraes fight in the United States, she got lit up by K1 Modifier. And
is that? Oh yeah, no, you're right. She's fought a couple times. Or no, right. She hasn't fought in the U.S. since. You're right.
Right. Yes. She went back to the regional scene and then also went to fight in KSW.
Yeah.
Lost in KSW in 58 seconds of the first round, might we add too. So it's hard to pick. So you have someone of her caliber going up against a perennial #1 contender. It's Vanessa Porto all day and tomorrow.
Yeah, coming off a knockout win over Milana Dudieva too in Invicta FC 26. All right, Vic, what about you? You given the relative newcomer in this case, Moraes, who's only had one Invicta fight before. Any shot?
She's 12-5. She's not really a newcomer, not really a novice. The problem that I'm having with this is
newcomer to the Invicta.
Well, I mean, this is her second Invicta fight, yeah. But, I mean, okay, the thing is, I want to get this off my chest right away. I don't think it's impossible for her to, grab a submission and, be able to, do something with that. But Porto has really good submission defense, and that's kind of her only real avenue to victory to me. The thing with Moraes is anytime she's fought outside of the Latin American scene, whether it was her fights in Peru or Brazil, she ends up getting checked. And even in Brazil against certain opposition, like, for example, Jennifer Maia and Luciana Pereira, who, at the time was, not doing that great and kind of has a almost 50-50 record at this point. I don't really see what she brings that is such a major threat to Porto here. Her striking isn't on that level. Her athleticism isn't on that level, and definitely not her, jiu-jitsu as well as far as it's being adapted to MMA. I don't really think that it's going to be as competitive. Maybe she'll hang on and not get finished. We might see a decision, but even Porto's early losses look better than Moraes' best wins. I mean, her debut loss to Karina Dam, or her losses to Modafferi and Justino, you know what I mean? You look at the name, this who's who of people that she's beaten, even on the Brazilian circuit. Juliana Werner is probably better than most of the fighters that Moraes has fought. Wins over Hitomi Akano and Evinger.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, back in 2007. Like, I don't need to go through this extensive list of people that she's fought. You can definitely check that out at your own leisure. But just that alone and the kind of experience that brings and what stayed with her, unless she's on some incredibly serious decline between that last win that she had and now, I mean, that's fair to say that she's probably in the final frame of her prime and not totally, like she hasn't started to taper off just yet. So why? Why would I pick Moraes in this?
She has, like, Jennifer or Vanessa Porto has only lost against title contenders and champions. Like, those are basically all. Karina Dom was a killer back in 2005. So she's been fighting since forever.
She's only lost to the best.
She lost to Cyborg. She lost to Mata Ferry back in the day, Amanda Nunes, Sarah D'Alelio, Barb Honchek. Like, when you have a pedigree like hers, like, and then you go and look at Moraes, it's just like her worst loss is still far better than any one of Moraes's wins. So
fighting
slight credit, and I will give her this little bit of credit just because I don't want to be too hard on the woman. She is only 22, and she's been fighting a ton since debuting in 2012. So
yeah,
true.
Yeah,
But
I think it's just a case of big expectations and feeding her to people before she's ready.
Yeah. On that note, the odds makers are in complete agreement. Porto opened at -380, is now at -528, and Moraes opened at +260, is now at +370. So that brings us to our main event: Sarah Kaufman, Penny Kianzad, and Vic. Who you got?
All right. We saw Kaufman go from Strikeforce to the UFC, and then eventually, her contract expired and she was essentially released. We saw her come back last year at the Korean organization, Battlegrounds or Battlefield, whatever that was called, and she had a win over Jessica Rose Clark. That was kind of nice. So, we're seeing that what's gone on with Kaufman is that, she's still stable. She's still someone who's able to use her grappling to control. She's got decent striking, and she's got more of a generalist vibe, but she gets by with it. When Kianzad kind of also has more of a generalist game as well, even though she's done a lot to emphasize on her submission game, it hasn't really played out that well. At least she hasn't really been able to chain those submission attempts consistently or actually pull off a submission and after reaching a higher level of opposition in Invicta.
She's actually never won a fight by submission ever.
No, she's attempted them and kind of threatened pretty decently, but not really anything she's never really won a fight by submission either. So, it's just what it is. I just think that Kaufman's experience and the fact that she's, again, not just, they're both generalists, but Kaufman's the better generalist. She's just, her striking looks a lot more put together. I mean, her takedown defense, like what is Kianzad's takedown game going to look like, and how's that really going to pose a threat to someone like Kaufman who's seen so much? And not only that, but we just saw she missed weight. Is that going to be a factor? I kind of, I see somebody miss weight like that and still go on and fight. Sometimes when it comes to women's fights, that seems to affect them a lot more adversely. So I got to go with Kaufman on this.
Dia?
Got to go with Kaufman on this one too. She has seen everything that Kianzad can throw at her. She's faced better versions of what Kianzad is going to throw at her. So, and she's been fighting since 2006. She went on like a crazy string of like KOs and TKOs back in her early career, which she has said in the lead up to this that she's going to bring the violence back because she did get into a very grinding style over the past 5 or 6 years. So it's hard to pick Kaufman on this one. It's happened a lot with a lot of the fights on this. It's really hard to pick against experience with stuff like that. Kianzad is very talented, but she has not faced anything close to, she has faced close to the competition that Kaufman has, and she's lost to them. So Yeah, I got to go with Kaufman on this one too. I'm wondering which Kaufman we're going to see. Are we going to see a revitalized Kaufman that we saw from back in the late 2000s, early 10s, or are we going to get the cage grappling kind of heavy grinding style Kaufman that we've had during her entire time that she was in the UFC? So, but either way, I see her winning.
It's worth noting that Kaufman has, with the exception of a split decision to Valentina Shevchenko, she has literally never lost to somebody who couldn't decidedly out-grapple her.
Yeah.
That has been... Valentina Shevchenko is the only woman to just decidedly outstrike Sarah Kaufman and beat her because of that. Everybody else, all of her other losses, Marlos Conan, Ronda Rousey, Alexis Davis, those are it. Yeah. And they're all by submission.
Yeah. And Kianzad is none of them when it comes to submission on the offense. So,
indeed. So, odds on that. Kaufman is a sizable favorite. Opened at -265. Is currently at -297. Kianzad opened at +185. Is now at +226. Just to roll back through this, that means you guys are both picking Kaufman, both picking Porto, both picking Jacobson. Split on Cummins versus Alba, although maybe not for the best reasons. Both picking Moraski, both picking Spencer. Split on Masters, Martin versus Martin. Both picking Luke Bunmi, and both picking Helen Peralta. So,
yeah, I think, and I'm hoping for Luke Bunmi to pull off some crazy Lumpini style violence too.
Do one of those shift stepping front elbows that hits somebody right in the middle of the forehead and knocks them out, and you're just like, what? That didn't even. How did that work?
How'd that work? Muay Thai fights always have the sketchiest looking fucking knockouts. Dude gets hit and then he just sprawls out like it's a fucking video game. And then they go to the replay and it's this dude just got fucking smashed in the middle of the head with essentially a ball peen hammer.
Yeah.
That's why he was out like that. So yeah, it's
we'll hope for some Muay Thai violence on the bottom of this card. All right, on that note, we should wrap things up. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneTime. You can find Vic on Twitter at Vic M. Rodriguez. I almost did it. Find Dio on Twitter at I'm Just Dio.
Yep.
And you can find Vic and I over at Bloody Elbow week in, week out. Dio occasionally trolling through the comments section just to make my job in life harder.
Yes.
And
I even go and comment on MMA Mania sometimes, just to really stir the shit.
All right,
it's been 3 or 4 years now and they still act like I am the main moderator at Bloody Elbow. It's amazing.
You've killed so many of them. It's like Rorschach in prison.
All right.
It's fantastic.
We'll be back for the 6th round. I'll be back for the 6th round following UFC St. Louis this weekend, and then be back next week for UFC 220, where we'll have all our normal Bloody Elbow shows, the Vivisection, If I Did It, Heavy Hands, Care Don't Care, Knuckle Ups No More, but all that. And give this video a like, thumbs up thing over on YouTube down there. That helps us a ton. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, MMANation.com, DOTCOM. That's where you get all the latest whatever shows, videos, news, analysis, all that stuff we do week in, week out. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you next time.